The global pandemic has got us thinking about our health in more ways than one. For London-based urban designer and architect Hálà El Akál has exposed the link between where we live and work and our personal well-being. It's a big focus for this industry innovator. As a director of PLP Architecture and founding member of research hub PLP Labs, Hálà is unlocking new tech and fresh thinking to disrupt and design the cities of tomorrow. Hálà El Akál, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Disrupted.
Thank you for having me.
Now, as an architect and urban designer, I mean, you must have a fascinating job. You've worked on everything from a master plan for a whole city to sort of residential and retail developments in cities like London here.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating to be able to work on large-scale new cities. Actually, the smallest scale is of projects I worked on was a public toilet on Oxford Street.
Here in London?
Here in London, yeah. So it is quite a wide scale and a lot of geographies and countries, which is very enriching culturally and professionally.
Now, you've worked in London for some years now, but you were born in Beirut in Lebanon. You were born and raised in a divided Beirut at the time. Just tell us about your childhood and your upbringing and your studies there and how that kind of influenced you personally and professionally.
Growing up in Beirut was great. It was difficult, but great, because I was born during the Civil War. But our family did really well to protect us from everything that was happening around us. I come from a family of builders, architects, and urbanists. They tried to keep me and my sister away from it, but we both ended up studying architecture. She's in film, and I'm an architect and urban designer. I think using Beirut as a laboratory to explore this field, a city where the social interactions and division are so visible on the built fabric, I think was a great experience and exposure. So the link between built environment and social interaction very early on overlapped and became what I was fascinated about.
So what kind of things really drive you in your work? What do you try to achieve?
I think there's a sense of responsibility as an architect and urban designer that every line that you draw either represents a wall, either a boundary or a different type of interaction. So there is this responsibility of trying to design places that reflect the societies that are going to inhabit them. So really delving into social interaction, into anthropological a sort of history almost, and looking at the future. So it's kind of trying to link past and future in a space.
You say the words looking to the future there. If we look back a little bit on the past year, the pandemic, which has obviously hit the UK here as it has globally, how much is what we've experienced over the past year disrupting your sector in terms of architecture and urban design? Is it going to kind of change things in the long term?
I think it's almost too soon to start to say this is exactly how it's going to impact. I feel like we need a bit of distance and space to analyze what has happened this year, what has actually hit us. But I think the most important thing is one link that has been sort of confirmed in people's minds is the link between their environment and their health.
Indeed.
And what we're doing at PLP Labs is developing tools to help improve that engagement, improve that understanding, and help communities take actions. And I can tell you more about that project later if you'd like.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, what is the link then between buildings and our health?
I mean, this is exactly what that project does. It's called Know Your Health. We developed it with Kumuzi and the Centric Lab and PLP Labs, obviously. And what it does, it takes you through an understanding of what are environmental stressors, so noise, light, sound pollution, etc., and psychosocial stressors from employment to a number of things. And then, so you go and you take this survey, and then you download a playbook that helps you understand where in housing, in biodiversity, in infrastructure that are part of your everyday life, you can make improvement. But this is just another example of a different way between local authorities and communities to engage, or landlord and tenants to engage. So at PLP Labs, we're very keen to improve the way we engage. with each other, because what the pandemic has shown, or what we have been naturally evolving towards, is we need to engage better and with more people.
You know, we've heard of people maybe now wanting to leave the cities and sort of go into more rural areas. What disruption does this all mean in terms of the stuff that you're going to be designing and putting up in the future?
I don't think we're going to see the death of the city or the death of the office or the death of the high street, as people have liked to say, because there are things we miss when we find ourselves isolated. I think people thrive in social interaction and connection. So I do think it is a temporary movement towards more rural environments.
But is it going to change the kind of developments that you design in terms of housing, residential and offices? Are they going to look much different now in the future?
Well, one small thing that I've noticed is the terraces. In the past, in every master plan, in the public realm, we used to draw a lot of outdoor seating areas, and people in the UK would look at me and say, "Hala, we're not on the Mediterranean. This is not going to work here." And at the moment, when we've had to do this with the pandemic and allow outdoor seating with spacing, and I hope they're here to stay. You look at the streets in London, and people have taken them. I don't want to appropriated them, and they've become, they're alive. And I hope that is here to stay. I think there are things like that that us as designers should learn from and incorporate.
What kind of places do you think you're going to be designing in the future, where we're going to work?
I think it becomes really about building within an office building or within any master plan, about the infrastructure you're providing for the users, whether they're social infrastructure, cultural infrastructure, or health and well-being infrastructure. And these are things that maybe today we're talking about, but we've been talking about them for years, but now they've become much more obvious, because as an employer, what do you need to do to attract talent? That is the question. And us as designers, how do we create spaces that spark creativity in the people who are in them? And it goes back to this network or this ecosystem of amenities throughout the building. So what we do on a lot of our projects is develop very bespoke strategies for this amenity strategy.
The two C's, community and culture, are clearly a big part of your focus,
Yes.
Something that you are really passionate about. Why is that?
It's the spaces that we like or that we tend to go back to or to remember to are often it's not a coincidence that there is a soul to them, and I don't think there's a recipe to recreate that soul, but we can, through our practice, through our different projects, best practice, and we try to recreate that. The worst thing for a designer is to create a space that people don't want to be in and don't appropriate and make their own.
Now, you obviously work here in the UK, across Europe, Middle East and Asia. It can't be one size fits all, right?
I think, for example, you get to the Middle East and it's about keeping the sun out. You're working, on a master plan in Manchester, and it's all about how do you get light in. So it's for example, dealing with environmental conditions in a very different way, or it's about when you're understanding how people live in homes. There are different social practices every day, or for example, in the Middle East, the religious aspect is more part of everyday life. So you do include them in the network of infrastructure that are important in a city.
Do people really care about culture and community, though, where they live and work? I mean, do you think they really are fussed about that?
I think we notice when it's not there anymore. So we take it for granted. And I think we're really extremely spoiled in London and in Paris, for example, compared to other places, because it's here, it's free, it's available, it's everywhere. Whereas in other places, it's not the case. So perhaps there's a little bit of taking it for granted. But if you look at this year, when these venues, places were not available, I think people have noticed and have asked for them to come back to life.
Sustainability, how important is that to you personally?
I mean, it's almost, self-preservation. We only have one planet, and
So it's a big part of your work, always at the front of your mind?
It is personally, but for example, if I take, that's why PLP Labs was created, but PLP Architecture, if you look at our work for the last 10 years, there are two things that so it's, the first one is innovation and disruption. So, for example, in the residential space, we looked at, the first co-living building in the UK. Another example is the largest timber roof in Europe, or a building we've designed in the Netherlands called The Edge, which was dubbed the smartest and greenest building in the world. So we do tend to be known for bringing together innovation in typology, so in housing, in office. And the second aspect is, how do we integrate sustainability to this? And the last 10 years, our key projects have brought this together quite nicely.
What kind of things we'll be using ourselves that actually make our environments a lot greener?
One of the reports, a group we've just recently published for the BCO, the British Council of Offices, and with a few partners as well, is on the use of wearables in the workplace. So there's an analysis of how we react to certain environments. So we did some pilot, different environment that we created at PLP, and measured the impact of, if you're working on your own, if there's more light, if you're surrounded by green spaces. So I think technology and the wearables allow us precisely to measure that connection, and not to just say, I want to put a green wall here because it's better, but actually to make that connection.
There's also things like artificial intelligence, VR, augmented reality, all those sorts of things. How do you think all those new bits of technology are going to disrupt the work that you do going forward?
One of the things that's it's designing tools that help communicate the end product, or how a space is going to look, very early on to our clients, to the communities, to the local authorities. So whether it's, using the goggles and moving into a space and experiencing it, or whether it's creating certain types of images. The other thing that we're developing actually is ways of designing in 3D. So you wear the goggles, but you can add floors, remove floors, and interact with the model.
So those days of sort of scrawling away on a bit of paper with a pencil have gone, have they?
No. I think it's a bit of both, because in the end, after, you always end up, I don't know, for some reason, around the table with a pen, and and people sketching and trying to find solutions. I think it's that back and forth.
But how about artificial intelligence in particular? I mean, that's being utilised in many different sectors in many different ways right now.
I think when you're looking, for example, at a city, and you're doing we tend to do lots of analytical mapping, so to understand what's there. Now, with a lot of data that is available, it's much easier to get that information and build a model that can absorb it and analyze it. So that's one aspect of things. And then there's, when you're designing certain details in a building, where there is an element of repetition, so you can teach our machines to do that repetition, whatever that is. So to take the parameters and then to spit things out. So.
Do you fear technology in any way? Because some people think, the robots are coming.
I don't worry, but I think of what we put in place to avoid any excess. So I think in Europe we are lucky to have a lot of protective policy in terms of data privacy, etc. So for me, it's a pleasure, because it liberates me from the systematic, repetitive, and allows me to use my brain more strategically. So.
And as we all hopefully slowly emerge from this pandemic that's engulfed the world now, what's your biggest motivation right now?
We've been working on projects in a lot of places around the globe, and we haven't been able to find ourselves around the table with the people we are working on, but also to go on site and see these places. I think in the immediate term, I miss that human interaction and physical interaction with the spaces.
So can't wait to get back around the table with those little sketches.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Hálà El Akál, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Disrupted.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.